So, in today's session, chapter 3, which is about features, scenarios, and stories, we are going to cover some of the concepts related to factors that drive the design of software products. Then, persona, that is one term associated with software products engineering, which is called persona. We will learn about the persona description, scenarios, user stories, and features, and the features designs basically. So let's get started. Software products. So there are actually three factors that drive the design of software products. The first one is about business and consumer needs, not made by the current products. So we can take an example of a book or magazine publishers, which are actually moving to both online and paper publication. So for certain books, for most of the books right now, if any publisher, books or magazine publishers are building a material for a particular concept or particular subject, then they are creating the paper publication as well as the online version. If it needs some incorporation of tools, then that is added. So they have to both look after the online and the physical format or paper publication of the books and the other resources. um, so this is one thing, the business and consumer needs, which are not met by the current products, and yet few software products can allow seamless conversion from one medium to another. It may be online to paper or paper to online, vice versa. Then dissatisfaction with existing business or consumer software products. So usually many current products are using so many features, particularly bloated with the features that are uh, very rarely used. And new companies may decide to produce simpler products in the same area that meet the needs of most users. Then the changes in technology can make completely new types of product. So virtual reality technology, it's maturing gradually, and the hardware is getting cheaper, and new products may exploit this opportunity. And in your early stage of product development, so actually without paying attention to the requirement of a specific client, you prioritize what product features will be useful to users, what are their likes or dislikes. And briefly, a feature is a fragment. So this feature is actually a fragment of functionality. So it can be something like a print feature for a specific application, print feature, a change background feature, a new document feature, so something like that. And before you start programming a product, you should create a list of features to be included in your product. Then comes your user understanding. So for any product development, it's always vital that users should spend some trying to understand. I mean, people, those who are involved with the process of the product development, they should actually spend some quality time with the to understand or to evaluate the users and various customers of the product. And a range of techniques have been developed for understanding this type of activity. So they actually include user interviews, various surveys, and some of these techniques are expensive or unrealistic for small companies also. But it's always advisable to get a sense of what are the vital aspects of a particular product development. Uh, this is your persona. I was talking about some of the concepts we are going to cover today. Features, scenarios, stories, persona is one of that. So Here you have persona. Persona can inspire the scenarios and they can be developed into user stories or stories, and then stories can define the vital features. The examples that I just gave you, print feature, background feature, new background feature that could be added, and scenarios can also inspire the feature as well. So here this figure actually explains that the personas, which are nothing but your imagined users. So personas are nothing but imagining some sort of user, and scenarios and user stories, they all lead to features that could be implemented for the software product. And you need to have a understanding of the potential users to design the features. And personas are basically imagined users where you create a character portrait of a type of user that you think might use your product. So that's not an actual user. You will start the development activity by imagining like there is a certain person or a user there. So let's take an example. If your product is aimed at suppose it does something like managing appointments for dentists, so you might create for that specific dentist appointment management, you might create a dentist persona, or a receptionist persona, or a patient persona likewise. So basically, personas are nothing but different types of users which help you imagine what these users may want to do with your software and how it might be useful. Hope you got the sense of it. What is the persona actually? In order to define the features here, so a slice of feature is nothing but a slice of functionality that can describe the product's appearance, its components, and the capabilities as well. Then your stories, or it is also called user stories. So a product feature described from the perspective of the end user, actually that's what your user story is. And user story format is actually helpful in relating features to benefits, and there is a specific format. I will give it to you. So while developing the stories, it's important to get a sense of what type of users are using that, what type of action is there, and what the benefits are there. We will look into that template of how to create the user stories in some of the examples in our later slides. Then this is your feature description. So product features, this is a feature name. So it has some input, activation and output, and this is actually a feature what action is basically doing. So product features are product traits or attributes that deliver value to end users and differentiate a product in the market. So the battery, for example, let's take an example. The battery life of an electronic device can be considered as a feature. So a feature is actually something that the user needs or requires, and a standard template can be used where you can define the feature by its input, okay, its functionality, its output, and how it is actually activated. So these are some of the elements of your standard template of the feature. So whenever you need to describe the feature, you need actual the action, the input, how it is activated, and what is the output. Then next, this is an example, new feature, new group feature description. So a new group feature is something that the user needs or wants, and a standard template can be used where you can define the feature by its input, which is the name of the group chosen by the user, its functionality, then its output, so and how it is activated. So uh, using the new group menu option or keyboard shortcut, it can be activated. So this is one sort of example for the new group feature. And that action description, the new group feature action description, is new container is supposed to be created with a specified name. So this is how what the template of a feature could look like. Then next, personas. So this is nothing but you're imagining some users as per your features or requirement. So personas are imagined users where you create a character portrait of a type of user that you think might use your product, like your dentist persona, receptionist, or patient persona, as I mentioned before. Let's see an example. Um, in table 3.a, you can also find this in book as well. A persona for a primary school teacher. So Jack is actually a primary school teacher. You could take some time to read the whole thing. Uh, what does it mention? Who is Jack? Where does he work? Where he has been born? And some other background details about him. Like different he has some sort of web development experience. Okay, just take a second to read the whole content, and this is what a persona actually looks like. So if you have already read what it's saying, basically what do you understand from here? So Jack is someone, so this is a persona of a teacher who is actually committed to the digital learning and who believes that using the digital devices can enhance the overall learning process. So this is as an example of how a persona could be created, and by reading this only, whatever information this persona provides you, by reading this you could get a sense of what is going to happen, what are we going to do, and how are we going to analyze this data afterwards. So basically, whenever there are certain things that you need to actually remember while describing or creating a persona for a specific software development process. So a persona should actually paint a picture of a type of a product user. Who is that user actually? What does he do? So the other important things, and it should be actually relatively short and easy to read, and you should describe their background, okay, and why they might want to use your product, and also educational background and technical skills. Though that information must be included, and you can see that that information is included here. So Jack's experience as a web developer means that he is confident in all aspects of digital technology. Some of his educational background detail also, and this persona here will help us access whether or not a software feature is likely to be useful, understandable, or usable by typical product users. So this is one example, and like this there are other examples as well in the book. Persona descriptions. So I mentioned you need to provide personal details, information, educational details, the job details, or relevant information which are needed. So there isn't a specific standard way of representing this, but these are some of the things which you should always emphasize when creating a persona. So recommended aspects are all these four: personalization, job related relevance, and education. So personalization, you should give them a name and say something about their personal circumstances. And then job related, if your product is targeted at business, you should say something about their job, and if necessary what their job involves. Okay, and then in education, you should describe their educational background, some their level of technical skills, experience, and this is important specifically for interface design mostly. Then relevance, if you can, you should say why they might be interested using the product and what they might want to do with it. This is how these are some of the important aspects of creating a persona. So those details. So again, another one example. Okay, you could take some time to read the persona about Emma, a history teacher, some of her personalized details, educational details, job details, um, and some other related information as well. So, if you look at this, it actually represents the user who do not have a Emma doesn't have a technical background and they simply want a system to provide support for administration. Okay, so then this is another example. Elena for a school IT technician. Okay, and in this example, you could read it later on, but I'm just going to mention a little bit about Elena. That Elena's persona here basically represents, looking at this explanation, technically skilled support staff who may be responsible for setting up and configuring the iLearn software. Okay, so these are the examples. You can read them and see what details and how those details have been incorporated based on the various attributes needed that we just saw in the previous slide. What are the different traits or attributes needed where explaining or describing a persona? You can see those aspects and compare them with all these examples, and that should give you an example of how to create a persona. Next comes persona benefits. So main benefit is to help all of us, you and me, everyone, and other development team members to emphasize with potential users of the software. And persona help because they are a tool that allows the developers to step into users' shoes. Okay, being on the user's shoes, you will try to see the whole functionality of the software. Okay, and they can also help you check your ideas to make sure that you are not including product features which are not needed or required. That's called feature bloating. So you always have to avoid unnecessary features to be added to the software. Okay, you don't need, it will help you avoid making the unwarranted assumptions. So designing over completed or complicated or irrelevant product. Okay, so proto personas or derived personas. So personas that are developed on the basis of limited user information are called actually your proto personas, and proto personas may be created as a collected team exercise using whatever information is available about the users, product users, and but they can never be as accurate as personas developed from detailed user stories. Okay, next we have scenarios. So what is scenario? So it is simply a description of a situation where a user is using your product's feature to do something that they want to do, and scenario descriptions may vary in length from 2 to 3 paragraphs up to a page of a text. Okay, so let's see. L- we have again, in the book actually what they have done, using the first persona description for like Jack, then Emma, then Elena, They have sort of given additional related information about each of the persons based on the basic initial persona. Okay. So fishing in Ullapool, this is Jack's scenario. So some of the class projects, they are using a system, learning management system called iLearn system. So in this particular example, it shows how Jack, whose persona we have already seen his all details, okay, and uh, they might use the iLearn system. Like you have a Blackboard system, they can use another one system called iLearn system. So here you can see some key elements of the scenario that may be included to help you think about the product features that you may need. So look at the explanation of it. What scenarios have been given? Uh, yeah, this is an extension of that as well. So for the island system, what can be various ways or extensions for creation of or development of new features? Okay, so you can refer this example, and these are the main elements of your scenario description. So all these six things, okay, they have been provided in both these two slides. If you look at the explanation, the whole example, you can read thoroughly. You can see that all these informations are basically explained here. So scenario name. So if you look at the previous slides of your Jack scenario, you can reference each of the terms here associated with scenario description in the slide. Okay. So scenario name, so it's an example of scenario that shows how Jack, whose persona is already seen before, we have seen the persona description. And so J- he is going to likely use the iLearn system. We got some more information about Jack now. And overall objective, so a brief statement of overall objective. Actually, in Jack's scenario, this is to support a class project on a fishing industry. If you see the description, if you read thoroughly, you can see that they're going to support the class project on a fishing industry, basically fishing in Ullapul. Then what's involved in reaching the objective? So information about what is involved in doing the activity. So for example, in your Jack scenario, this involves gathering the reminiscences from relatives. Here it is mentioned. Yeah, reminiscences from relatives, use newspaper archives and old photographs. So in this typical objective, what is actually involved? What are the different information involved? Then personas of actors involved in the scenario. So it references to the personas involved in Jack's case, basically, so that you can get information about the capabilities and motivation of that user. Then problems which cannot be addressed by the existing system. So there should be an explanation of problems that cannot be addressed using existing system. It's mentioned somewhere here. Um, Young children. Yeah, so here there is a mention of this that young children actually don't understand the issues of copyright and privacy. So photo sharing requires a site that a teacher can moderate to make sure the published images are legal and acceptable. Okay, this is in this paragraph explained here. So this is something in reference to this aspect of scenario description. Then possible ways that the problem could be tackled. So it's a description of one way that the identified problem might be addressed. So in Jack's scenario, basically in our example, here, whatever given, the preferred approach is to use an external tool designed for the school students, which is likely your iLearn system. Okay. Same way, okay, there is Emma and Elena. So for each of them, based on their initial persona, their scenarios have been developed. Okay. And Emma is actually a history teacher. So Emma is an e-learning skeptic and she is not interested in the innovative applications basically. What it looks like from the example given in the table. And she wants a system that will make her life easier and reduce the amount of routine administration that she has to do. So her scenario, okay, here that is given, Emma's scenario discusses how parts of the process, now suppose setting up an email group and web page as mentioned here, can be automated by the iLearn system. Okay, so you can refer this example related to Emma, in relation to Emma, and see what does it explain actually. You can take your time and go through all the examples, and which will help you for doing an assignment, similar type of assignment I'm going to give it to you. So you can work on it, understanding the persona, scenarios, user stories, what are the templates, what do they need, and how you can come up with your own idea of creating them for a particular requirement. So writing scenarios should always be written from user's perspective, and your starting point of scenario writing should be the personas that you have already created. I mentioned before, because first we looked at Jack's, Emma's, and Elena's persona, then we got to know about the scenario, then we saw the scenarios, right? So you should normally try imagine several scenarios from each persona. And ideally, scenarios should be general and should not include implementation information. However, describing an implementation is often easiest way to explain how a task is done rather than explaining it, right? Then, yeah, for the same iLearn system, they have given the example for Elena's scenario. Okay. And from this Elena's scenario, looking at the same example of the previous scenarios such as for Jack's or Emma's, you can see what are the various aspects of scenario description, such as this one I want talking about. Let me show you. Yeah, these are the things. Okay, these are the main elements for scenario description. We just have to, you can compare them here. Yeah, this one. Okay. These two slides are about the same Elena's example. So you have to look at this example and find out what is your scenario name here, what is the overall objective, what's involved in reaching that objective, then personas or actors involved in the scenarios, and which problems cannot be addressed by the existing system, and possible ways that a problem can be tackled. All the aspects you can see how they have been addressed through this example. User involvement. So now we are going to move towards the user stories. Okay, that's why we are looking at user involvement. The best approach is to develop an imaginary scenario based on our understanding of how the system might be used, then ask users to explain what you have got wrong, right? So that's why it's really essential. for your involvement of users in the whole process. So we are going to see user stories. So like persona, like scenario, you have to create or build the user stories for a given development process. So what is a user story? User story is an informal general explanation of a software feature written from the perspective of the end user. Okay, so let's take a college management system. Take an example, a college management system. Suppose let's say our Three Rivers College Management System. In your website, you see different sections, right? Some sections dedicated for admission, some section for financial requirements or college mission. So there are different sections, and you do have the interface provided to you for enrolling into courses for a given semester. So there is a section about um, I think online also you can withdraw and drop as well. Okay, so there is that feature or section as well. So for a whole system, what are the various feature? We have to be, specific. We need to have a specific idea or information about it. That's what we need, and we are going to get help from our scenarios, personas, and user stories. Okay. So the purpose of the user story is to articulate how a piece of work will deliver a particular value back to the customers. Okay, and user stories are a few sentences in simple language that outline the desired outcome. Okay, so an example can be here, this one. As an author, I need a way to, so author is a user, so I need a way to organize the book. What action is going to do, what function that I am writing into chapters and section. Okay, so this is one example of a user story, but what is the template, what is the method for it? How do we create user stories? So this is the template actually. So user stories have a standard format how they can be created. As a, you need to mention the role, the username or the role, and I want or need. What do they want or what do they need to do? What type of function, right? So like the way before it has been seen here, as a author, I want or need a way to organize the book to, or that I'm doing something. The author is writing into chapters and sections. Hope it makes sense to you. So there is another example you can see. As a teacher, a role, I want to tell the members of the group, okay, to do something like when a new information is available. So this is one example of a user story. Look at the same here as well for the second one. The role need to be able to report who is attending a class trip, okay, so that the school maintains the required health and safety records. So this has to be the format of the user stories. Okay, user stories in planning. Um, so user stories should focus on a clearly defined system, feature, or aspect of a feature which can be implemented in a single sprint. You already know what is a scrum, what is a sprint. We have already seen them in Agile. Okay. Um, so whatever can be any feature or any aspect or functionality which can be implemented in a single sprint. Okay, the user stories actually focus on that. Then we have another concept called epic. So what is epic actually? So the basic, you already know what is a scrum, right? So basic unit of work defined in the scrum is a unit story. User story is a part of the scrum or a unit for a scrum. But very often when product owner writes a user story for a feature or against customer request, that looks simple in the beginning, but while covering all related works or scenarios, same user story can expand so much that it cannot fit either in a week or a sprint time frame. Okay, and it is the time to consider a bigger user story, which is nothing but your epic. And then you can start slicing it in the smaller user stories, and this way your agile teams get better effort estimate and get smaller but concrete output in single sprint. Okay, an example of epic, it's not provided here. So an example of an epic can be, as a system manager, I need a way to back up the system and restore either individual applications, files, directories, or the whole system. So as a system manager, so I'm mentioning about a user story, but in perspective of a system manager. So you can see that this is an epic example which will require further multiple sprints for its completion, okay, or implementation. So one example given based on the EMAS scenario, you can refer to the persona and the scenario for Emma, the history teacher. So based on that, the user stories are developed. So as a teacher, she wants to be able to log into the island account from home, using the login her Google credentials, so she doesn't have to remember another login ID password. Okay, this is one user story based on Emma's information. Then she wants to access the apps that she can use for class management and administration, and another one user story, okay, related to the accounts credentials. So the stories and scenarios, you saw, you already saw what are the user stories, what are the scenarios, what are the personas. So as you can express all functionalities in a typical scenario as user stories, so do you really need the scenarios? Okay, so actually we need scenarios because scenarios are considered natural and helpful due to certain regions. So if you are interviewing real users or are checking a scenario with real users, they don't talk in the stylized way that is used in the user stories. Okay, and people relate better to more natural narrative and scenarios. And scenarios often provide more context or the information about what the user is trying to do and the normal ways of working. You can do this in user stories, but it means that they are no longer simpler statements about the use of system features. So user story is important, scenarios are also important to have a more better sense of the whole thing. And actually, scenarios are created by user researchers to help communicate with the design team mostly. And user stories are created by product or the project managers, okay, to define the requirements prior to the sprint in agile development. That's the basic difference between the scenarios and user stories. So, scenarios created by user researchers to help with communication for design team, and the user stories are created by managers basically for defining the requirements prior to the sprint in the agile process. Next, feature identification. So we just saw what is the feature, some explanations about it in the previous slide. So feature is a unit of functionality in a software system that satisfies a requirement. It can represent design decision and provide a potential configuration option. Okay, So for feature identification, it can be either independent, coherent, or relevant. So features should not, whatever features going to be developed for the system, they shouldn't depend on how system features are implemented and should not be affected by the order of activation of other features. Coherence, so this should be linked, features should be linked to a single item of functionality, and they shouldn't do more than one thing, and they should never have side effects. Then comes relevance. So features should reflect the way that users normally carry out some task, and they shouldn't provide certain obscure functionality that is hardly ever required. Okay, they need to be relevant always. Next, in your feature design, what are the things required actually? User knowledge, technology knowledge, product knowledge, and your domain knowledge. Okay, these are some of the design attributes while designing the feature. Um, Next, the factors in feature set design. What are the various factors? So when you are designing a product feature set and deciding how features should work, you must consider 6 factors as shown here, and the simplicity and functionality. So you need to find a balance between providing a simple, easy to use system, including enough functionality to attract users with variety of needs. Okay, then comes familiarity and novelty. So users prefer that new software should support the familiar everyday tasks that are part of their work or life, and to encourage them to adopt your system. And you need to find a balance between familiar features and new features that convince the users that your product can do more than its competitors. Then for automation and control, some users like automation where the software does things for them, okay, and others prefer to have a control. So you have to think carefully about what part of the development process can be automated, how it can be automated, and how users can configure the automation. Okay. So you need to decide whether you want something to be done in a controlled way manually, or something, some part you need automation, because you need some of the parts to be handled manually, some of the parts to be automated. Okay. Next is your feature creep. What does it mean actually? It's also could be understood as software bloat, or feature it is, there is a term, so which actually occurs when extra features go beyond the basic function of a product. Okay, so there are 3 reasons why actually this feature creep could occur. So most of the time, product managers who are involved in the process are reluctant to say no. They can't decline when users ask for specific features. Too many features if you have in a product, that's the issue. Then developers try to match the features in competing products. That's another one issue. This is one reason. Then product includes the features to support both inexperienced and experienced users. That's another reason for the feature creep. How to avoid the feature creep actually? So you need to ask some of the future questions. So what are those? So whatever feature is going to be developed, to avoid the feature creep, you need to get some information such as, is the feature really necessary? Is it important and used by most users or not? Okay. Then is the feature enhancement expected, or new feature addition will probably required next or not? Okay, and does it address general concerns or just for something specific? So these are some of the questions needed to be emphasized while developing the features to avoid the feature creep issue. So feature derivation, you should think about the features needed to support the user actions identified by active verbs such as use or choose. So that's about from your product vision or from the scenarios you can get a sense of what feature actually is for your typical part of your requirement. And you can highlight the phrases in the description. Okay, whenever you are having that software description, you can identify the feature by highlighting the phrases. Here one example is given for the I-learn system vision. So based on the Jack or MS scenario persona user stories. So what does the I-learn actually what should the I-learn system actually look like, and what's the vision? So here from the example here, okay, uh, you can highlight some of the phrases in the vision suggesting the features that could be part of your product. Okay, let me see Jack's case. Okay, one example for Jack's scenario is given. So you can take this table for the island system vision, and in reference to the island system, what does your Jack scenario provides? Jack scenario description. What information does it have? So from this, you could come up with what can be the highlighted phrases, right? So how if there is a feature that allows the users to access the web-based resources, or that can another feature which can allow the system to exist in multiple different instantiations. So like that, come up with what are the different features for the Jack scenario in relation to your island system vision, the example provided here. Yeah, actually, here what is going on in the Jack scenario based on the island system, the highlighted phrases could be uh, this is a continuation of the previous slide. So there is a wiki group for writing in your Jack scenario. Then there is access to SCRAN, is history archive. Okay, and this is a shared national resource which is providing access to historical newspaper and magazine articles for schools and various universities. Okay, so you are getting some sense of the features in relation to your or in accordance to your Jack scenario. See what else we have. Feature list. Okay, so whenever you are going through a feature identification process, the output should be a list of features that you can use for your implementation of the product successfully. So actually, you don't have to pay attention to a lot of details about the feature, but you can, while implementing the feature, you can add detail into it. Okay. And always describe the features using the standard template. If you remember in the previous slides, we saw the input, the action, and the output requirements for the specific feature description. You can use that template for describing the features. Next, this is the iLearn authentication feature, um, based on the mm, based on one of the user scenario. It could be your Jax, Emma, or Elena. I think it's Elena. Okay, so you can refer the persona user story scenario of your Elena's example on the previous slides, and could refer that or relate it to the island authentication system. Okay, so this is an example of feature template which is used to describe the system authentication feature in the island system, and some of the features um, can be described using the previous user stories that you have in the previous examples. Okay, so in as a system manager, so there can be different users related to the island authentication system. So for a system manager, you may want to create or configure the island environment by adding or removing services to or from the environment. Okay, and you can also set up sub environments that can include subset of activities that are included in another environment. Then as a teacher, you want to be able to add services that are not integrated with the island authentication system. There could be your you know that's the description I am actually talking about. What can be the description? Okay, what is authentication, how they are doing it, how they are using the login and password system for authenticating. That's about the description I am talking about in terms of different users such as system manager and the teacher as well. Okay, you need to have the constraints. So the use of some tools may be limited for license regions, so that maybe need to access the license management tools during configuration. So those details are provided, and the comments. So you can refer to the LNS and the JAX scenario with relation to ILEARN authentication and provide, you can see the comments here. So they are emphasizing on the future authentication um, processes, which is based on biometrics, and they are considering it is as a viable uh, design that could be this feature could be implemented in the system, which will be useful to everyone. The explanation is given here. Okay. The next comes innovation and future identification. So scenarios always tell you how users work at the moment, and they don't show how they might change their way of working if they had the right software to support them. The stories and user stories and scenarios are tools for thinking, and they help you gain an understanding of how your software might be used. You can identify a feature set from stories and scenarios. So look at the examples for Jack, Elena, and Emma's case and try to see, using various aspects, attributes, and templates, how they have been developed, how they have been created. And with those examples, using those, try to come up with your own examples. So that's all here. These are only key points. Let me show you something. I'm going to explain about the assignment. Give me a moment. I'm going to stop sharing. We'll share again after making it available to you. Allow me some time. You should be able to access the assignment in third unit, that is feature scenario and stories. Mm, I'm sharing that here. This is the one I was talking about. Individual assignment for user stories, use cases, and UML. UML you already know. We have used this in database, in Java programming course as well. So see, what you need to do, you need to work on some of the user stories, okay? And the second one, using a template, formal use of a use case. Uh, then this one, using the UML diagram and the UML use case diagram. So here some of the examples actually given, the real life scenarios. How to write a user story. So this is one example template given to you based on the one we just saw in our slide, as the role, need or activity, and what's the reason, all those details. Then for building the user story, this is the template you should use. Okay, this is an Excel file, user story template. Using the same template, you can refer to some of the examples of user story, and this is a sample user story, someone else's sample user story. Okay, take the help from all the resources for coming up with your own user story template. Then for use case template is given. You need to use this use case template for use case building and user story template for the user story building. Okay, hope it makes sense to you. Then use case, for building use case, you could use some of the resources such as an example, some additional materials, then a sample use case already, which is already completed using this template. Use this template and then come up with your own example for the assignment. Next, for UML use case diagram, you can use this link for the Draw.io application, the software. Okay, online using this tool, you could have used this for Java and database as well. So use this one for creating the UML use case, and this is one example, the link I have provided. Okay, so just go through. It does look complex to you. It will just take some time. So whenever you are going to create a user story, look at the examples that we saw in the slide. Also refer to the examples and that sample template as well, and try to build your own. So that's all. And there is another one discussion, which I will I'll make it available after some time, and the due date will also be posted for the assignment, this one as well. So that's all in this chapter. Uh, so does anyone have any question?